Thank you so much, Connie, and thank you for that plug, which was entirely unsolicited, I assure everybody. Okay, so fantastic. We've got lots of questions. We may not get through them all today, so what we've arranged with the organisers is that the questions that don't get answered now live will be sent to the speakers, and they can send in the answers, and then you'll get a document from Vanessa by email. So don't worry, if your question isn't addressed now, you will get your answer, and also contact details so that you can follow up if you need to. Okay, great. So having said that, let's start with some questions. So if we go in the order of the speakers, the first question that came in for Kim was, Kim, when you mentioned straw as an alternative, what kind of straw are you suggesting? Because for directional thatching, the way that it is grown and harvested might have an impact on its usability.
Well, the potential to use straw as an alternative is at this point just a suggestion which needs a lot further research, as well as discussions with the local communities and thatchers, as their local knowledge, their pride in their place, and in the case of thatchers, their technical expertise is critical before any alternative solution can be sought. However, I would imagine it would be something like barley straw, as that has been used in the past on the Isle of Lewis.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so we've got two questions here, one from Tim and one from Susan, which I can put together for Andrea and Jenny. And it's basically about when the buildings were relocated in Sweden, were the residents relocated as a community with the buildings? And in particular with regard to large multifamily buildings, and also was there any change to the buildings, like were they insulated?
I can answer to this. Not yes and no, because not. I know in Malberget, some of the inhabitants of they were moved to the new neighborhood, but not in the same building. So it's because the point is that whenever they are asked to move, they need to have immediately a new apartment to move in, and this it is not possible because of course it takes a lot of time to move the building and repositioning it and make all the connections and so on. And regarding the energy efficiency, I mean actually for me it's kind of a tricky question, because the way I approached this building was exactly for a project on energy efficiency that had these buildings as case studies. But unfortunately, not much has been done, because it was estimated that it would have a too strong impact on the value of the building. So they were dispensed from meeting the requirements for energy efficiency of newly built buildings. So, but on this you can find a couple of publications by me and the other project members about this. You can easily find them online.
Okay, fantastic. So now a question for Alan from Nick Boys. Alan, how future-proof are the scans? You say the images are easily used in social media. Is that at a cost of accuracy or longevity?
It's a very good question to ask, and I think that there is quite good longevity. I mean, on the one hand, we preserve the original photographs from which the models are developed, are created, so that it's possible to go back and to make things at a higher level of accuracy. But also we've done some experimentation, and we find that for models that have got, once you get above something like 300,000 vertices, and certainly once you get up above 1 million vertices, it becomes difficult for people to identify which are the higher resolution scans. We kind of like did scans at different resolutions, and found, and that's what we found. And so Sketchfab encourages you to keep your scans below 1 million, but that seems to be fine in terms of the accuracy that people get and people see. And then thirdly, once we've got a scan, we can use it in different ways. So one of the things that we've done is to, as well as you've got the interactive experience of clicking and moving around, but also we can spin them around and make quite short videos with a bit of commentary, and that plays quite well on things like YouTube and Facebook. So you can just watch a short video of an object and get some commentary on it and see it spinning around, and then provide a link that people can then use that link to go, if they want to go and look at it in more detail or look at it in the context of a reconstruction, if that exists, and then that's a possibility as well.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Question for Connie now. Connie, how often do you think you'll have to adapt and update your site plan for managing retreat and loss?
Oh, gosh, good question. I suppose it will depend. As I said at the end there, we have a monitoring brief in place at the site, and that will dictate a lot of what our future works will need to be at the site itself. The adaptation plan will, I suppose, with other sites like my colleague Fergus talked about it yesterday on Skellig and on Ballinaskelligs. They will all feed into the plan, and it will be reviewed accordingly. I think there's a strategy. Michael, my colleague, and Pauline have been dealing with it more than I, but there is a strategy in place for that. I don't have a timeline for it. There's no point in me saying I do, but I imagine it's going to be looked on quite regularly.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, another question for Kim. Kim, has research been done on extending the areas of marram grass or on phased cutting? This is from Ali.
Well, the potential to extend areas would have to be discussed with a body such as SNH. But the marram grass only grows under very specific conditions, such as the sand and the beach dunes, which is where it currently is, and that's where it thrives. So it would be quite difficult to extend the area. In terms of phased cutting, well, it needs to be cut in the winter, so you couldn't just phase the cutting throughout the duration of the whole year. But yes, to a point, as the rethatching just needs to be done every 2 to 3 years. So each year you're only looking at rethatching 2 to 3 houses. So you wouldn't do all 7 in 1 year.
Okay, great. Let's go down. Yeah, this is a question to Andrea and Jenny from Therese, and she asks, who do you think should do the evaluation of the heritage impacts? If enough has been done, as you suggested in the last slide, or what could have been done otherwise? I think really Therese is looking for lessons learned from your experience.
Well, I think, well, there are many people, the stakeholders who could evaluate, but of course one risk in these settlements are that people, if they're not happy with urban transformation, they will just move away from the inland to move elsewhere. I think that is one risk with having an unsuccessful urban transformation, let's say. Things I think could have been done a bit differently from hindsight is I think not enough attention was paid to the built heritage in the urban planning early in the various planning phases. The impacts on the built heritage was neglected for quite a long time. It wasn't really addressed properly. I think it, generally speaking, was thought as something that could easily be solved along the way. And then after a few years, when, let's say, the mining company realized, but it's not that easy to get the permission to just delist buildings and have them demolished, let's say, as example was for the town hall. I mean, that was a very practical situation that was a bit silly, because that could have been avoided, I think, if you had an early dialogues and actually working together in this. And also what we try to describe a bit is it's very much, let's say, top-down planning. And I think maybe the inhabitants and citizens are quite, well, you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, let's say, but also I think that's a good trust in the society and the mining company, and the council will look after them and do their best. But I think we also see these art expressions, for instance, and these bottom-up initiatives where people are unhappy with what's happening and they lost their experience, and that takes different expressions, let's say. So I think to build in that in the process in a more active way should maybe have been good to take into account early on in the process, and to actually allow in the process.
Yeah, okay. It's obviously a very complex question, but thank you for trying to answer that. Okay, a question for Alan now. Another quite slightly complex one. Do you think VR is something visitors feel is an acceptable substitute to an actual visit? Past experience suggests visitors will accept it as an alternative, as an add-on, or as a way to promote the cause of a site, but do you think that visitors would be happy to pay a comparable amount as an entrance fee into a heritage site for this type of experience?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and it's quite a difficult one to address. I mean, I would normally answer that by saying, first of all, that I don't really see VR as being a substitute to real-world interactions. I mean, much more comfortable seeing it as something which supplements and enhances a visit to a site rather than replaces a visit to a site. That being said, you know, there's lots of places that I'm not going to be able to go to, or that anybody's not going to be able to go to, and that's clearly enhanced at the moment in the situation that we're in. And so VR can play a role in giving people an access to a site that wouldn't normally be accessible to them for whatever reasons, maybe cost of travel, time, any of these things. And then reversing it the other way around, you know, there's a limited number of people that would have access to most sites, and VR can really stretch that because it's a digital domain. It means people can you know, visit remotely, and so whereas if you don't have to physically be at a place to visit it, then it increases the audience that is there available. I do think people are prepared to pay for digital experiences. I mean, you know, people pay to go to the movies and the like, and VR can command a cost. But also I think that there may be things like other ways in which remuneration takes place, that you can reach more people, so everybody pays a little bit more. But I think in the current climate, it's really nice to think that these things could be as open as possible to people and not be costing people a lot of people to see them.
Okay, thank you, Alan, for trying to answer that. Okay, we're going to take one more question for Connie, so everyone's got two. And then, as I said, the remainder of the questions will be emailed to participants and they'll be asked to answer them, and you'll get those. And as well, some people were asking for links to documents and things, so we'll put all those in the Word document that we send you as well. So last question to Connie from Natalie Skeet. First of all, you produced a lovely presentation. Do you think the management of loss needs to be considered in all conservation plans for sites similar to Dunbeg, or do you think surveying sites is more useful? I think maybe this is about where you put the limited resources.
I think, well, certainly what we've done at Dunbeg and the decision-making process for that, as I say, has informed other strategies for national monument sites elsewhere around the coast and on our island. So it is informing conservation and management plans for those. But I think both go hand in hand, surveying, recording, and then looking at the loss or the potential loss and trying to gauge for that into the future. In order to gauge that, I would say we have to know as much as we can about the monument to identify where it's going to be lost and what is going to be lost. So I think they go hand in hand. They're not mutually exclusive. So I would say a part of the conservation plan is a record, as much of a definitive record of the monuments as possible. So yes, I would say both would be my answer to that. Just in regard to the previous question, just to say I don't feel I did the questioner justice. If they wish to contact me, I can send them on a more definitive answer on that, on the conservation adaptation plan. So my colleagues, I know, will be glad to assist and answer their questions. So.
Okay, fantastic. So we're just 1 minute past 12, and it remains for me to wrap up and say thank you very much to all the speakers. It was really, I found it personally fascinating, and I can see from all the questions that our attendees also really enjoyed your presentations. Also a big thank you to the organisers, and behind the scenes here to Claire, Vanessa, Aaron and Chris, who have helped us all with our steep learning curve on Zoom. So thank you to them. The next session is on urban assessment, and it starts at 1 o'clock. So thanks for coming, stay safe, and I hope you enjoy the next session as much as this one. Okay, thanks everyone.